You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hi, everybody. This is Cynthia Toolin-Wilson, and I'm here with my friend Thom Brucie on my show, Author to Author. Thom is going to talk about his book of poetry called Apprentice Lessons. Hi, Thom. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Doing well today. Thank you. How are you feeling?
Good. Can't complain. I could, okay, of course, but we won't.
There you go.
Yeah. Would you like to start us with a prayer?
Yeah, thank you. Lord, this book of poems is about workmanship, and life lessons. And I ask that you continue to bless me with your spirit of wisdom and peace and learning, and that I bring the blessings of craftsmanship to those around me. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So this is, I believe, our third interview, and I have to say I'm impressed with your work. For one thing, I've never even tried to write poetry, and I'm sure that if I did, it would not make as much sense as yours. So I'm impressed.
No, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So you were a carpenter.
I was a carpenter for many years, more than 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I got injured on a job site.
Oh.
And had to have a little surgery. But the consequences of that was I was out of work for quite a long time. And I went from high school to the military to work. And so I decided I was going to be off work for a little while. And there was a little junior college not too far from where we lived. So I decided I get bored real easy and I have to have something to do, So I decided to take a couple classes, and I was in my 40s and a freshman in college, and I just really enjoyed going back to school. Okay. And so I got a whole semester under my belt, and I called my boss and I said, I kind of like this. How would you feel if I took another semester off, just kind of went after a little associate's degree? And he said, yeah, okay. And so I did. And anyway, I liked school enough that I went on for the next about 14 years and earned, degrees. And along the way, when I was at that junior college, I took a little creative writing class. I had been always interested in art. In fact, one of the components of this book is the notion of craft and art and excellence and those sorts of aspects of life. And I had such a good time in that writing class, I thought, well, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to learn how to be a writer. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. Here we are.
Yeah, good. Yeah, like you, I enjoyed learning, and after I'd been out of school for the better part of, 20 years, I decided to go back and get an MFA in writing at Albertus, so in creative writing. So I understand exactly what you're saying. So anyway, so that's very good. So tell us about your book and tell us about your poems.
This when I came back from Vietnam, at that time the government had what was called Project Transition, and if one of the young guys coming back could get a job in the community before it was time for his service to end, or hers, then we could do like what would amount today is on-the-job training. and we were renting a place from an old retired carpenter who he went home, after he retired, and his wife got so tired of having him around getting under her feet, she told him to go find something to do. So he bought 12 old houses in the area and converted them to duplexes. And we were renting one of them, and he had just finished making it ready. In fact, we were the first renters. And we got to talking, and my family's background is labor. My grandparents and my father, a lot of my aunts and uncles are in the labor force, hands-on labor. And so I talked to him a little, and he said, well, look, I can use a hand. And so I started working for him. His name was Virgil McLean, and he was an old craftsman from the old school, and everything had to be right, and everything had to be learned, and progress had to be earned. And it's way years away from it as I thought about him from time to time, and of course I learned to love carpentry and the craft itself. Just much of what I learned as a carpenter has made sense to me as an adult, and as the ongoing process of life occurs, some of those lessons. And I just put these poems together over a period of time to reflect some of those funny lessons and funny ways he communicated, and yet the deepness of what he shared. And that's where that's the sort of where these came from.
Interesting. So when I was first reading it, I didn't see at the front where you had the dedication. Excuse me, the dedication. And I was like, is he talking about Virgil the poet? But yeah, I can see what an influence he had on you.
Yeah. Well, I'm not Dante, but I still had a Virgil. It's okay.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So it's interesting to think of. This when you have the apprentice lesson, what is craft, what is art, what is beauty, how the three are related. So I thought there really is something to that. Would you want to address that lesson?
I can a little bit, I think. I'm old enough that when I was an apprentice, it was back when there's one of the poems in there, Virgil gave me a hand auger, which is a drill and a bit. And he told me when I could learn how to drill a straight hole, perpendicular to where it was supposed to go, then he would let me use a power drill. We had big old heavy motored drills and saws and things, not like today, the beautiful light battery driven ones. But and he did the same thing with a saw. He said as soon as you can cut a piece of wood with a handsaw, square and straight, then you can take your time and learn how to use a power saw. And his point was that, you have to take your time. I think, I was reading, I think it was Carl Jung who said, all haste is from the devil. And I don't know if that's true, but the notion of it is, I think, pertinent, because over our years on the planet, the technology has influenced the interpretation of time, and not just Einstein, not just an understanding of the mathematics of time, but the sense of relevance to life kids today are on the telephone all the time. They're always in a hurry. Emoji speaks more for them than language. And when I learned the craft from Virgil, he really was a hands-on teacher, and he really did tell me everything we build has to last at least 100 years. And I've carried that belief with me in what I write and my raising my children and my relationships with other people. And at one point when I was probably in my prime as a carpenter, the United States introduced a thing called the right to work, which was really nothing more than an attempt to break the unions, and it succeeded, unfortunately. But in the process of doing that, one of the things unions did that was a good thing was the notion of apprenticeship, where an old carpenter in my craft would teach a young guy like me sort of what we used to call tricks of the trade. And there are things that 25, 30, 40 years of working in the craft is in a person's hands and in his way of thinking and his interpretation of how to make something that you can't put in a book. They just don't fit. It's not mathematics. It's intuition. It's life lived. It's love and frustration and knowledge from trying and failing and trying again and improving a little, that sort of thing. And I noticed over the next few years that as work became more, as the notion of the right to work eroded apprenticeships, then the quality of work changed, and the attitude of craft began to change. And just like I think I've noticed the same thing in teaching over the past 20 years or so that I've been doing this. There is a sense that I had a teacher in college that who taught education classes. I minored in education when I was doing my bachelor's work. And he sat me down one time while we were talking, and he said, don't worry too much about what grades kids earn, because sometimes they don't really hear what you say or know what you said for 20 years, but eventually they do. And that was a love of teaching, expression for me of a love of teaching and an understanding that the caring about, the transfer of feelings and sensations and pertinence and relevancy in life is a legitimate component of being a teacher and being a learner. Being an apprentice willing to garner knowledge so that you can take knowledge and think. So that sense of growth was lost, and one of the reasons I did write the book is over the years of my teaching I've seen, and I think we're in the throes of it right now, sadly, is the notion that STEM education is complete. I noticed someone sent me an article about a university in Australia, I think, that doubled or tripled the cost of humanities classes to encourage students to, go into technology so that, young people can grow up to be happy workers in a beehive. And I feel like that is a great loss to not just this system of education that we're losing, but to generations of youngsters who are going to grow up away from the struggle of a complex sentence, for example, or a metaphor, or independent thought, critical analysis is no longer
valued.
Admired, maybe is the word I'm looking for.
Okay.
So these poems, I want to reflect learning, a willingness to learn, patience in learning, and the notion that excellence comes with time. You don't just wake up one morning, a good carpenter or a good writer or a good teacher or a good father or a good whatever, a person wants to, however a person wants to express the importance of his or her life. That's the kind of the impetus of these poems that reflects the dignity of labor. I'm disappointed that the notion of working with your hands is becoming, second-class citizenry or something like that, when, for me at least, craft and all the different crafts, whether it's the craft of motherhood or, the craft of teaching or the craft of writing a book, that's dignified human behavior. And it's a deep expression of caring.
I agree. Yeah.
Oh, well, good. I like preaching to the choir because it's easier.
That's true. But what you say is true. I think that people are, I've seen this in my own life because I'm a doctor, of course. And my first husband who died and my second husband were both involved in transportation. The first man was a bus driver, the second a truck driver. So when you see the reaction of, why are you marrying this person? That says more than anything in the world. These are people that get up every day. They drive very big vehicles that could kill a lot of people, if they don't know what they're doing. But there's that I don't know. I think it's like an elitism in this culture, that it doesn't value the common work anymore. So,
I think that's true.
Yeah. So if you don't work with your mind, or if you just don't own a business and have a lot of people under you, you're not as good or something. It's a weird kind of classism. So. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah.
And it's inappropriate. I mean, it's just.
Of course.
It's not based on anything other than the notion of ownership and power. Those are important sorts of pieces to a person's life. But when they become predominant or dominant in some way, then they're dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's really an odd situation where this country that's supposed to be so democratic, not in the sense of politics, but in the sense of status, has really become quite stratified, especially not only in reality, but also in opinion.
Yeah. I have a friend who teaches, and he says, I refuse to teach my students to grow up to be happy slaves. So it's probably not that bad, and I don't think he means it to be insulting to anyone who experienced that sort of thing in their history or their family. But He means it as the way you're expressing the stratification of dignity that our culture has made, and that there is a sadness, and it's destructive.
Yeah, it's also just plain wrong.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah. So I'm kind of surprised that that sentiment would also be towards people who are craftspeople, because because of their expertise is so apparent. That it just seems odd.
I think the pendulum will swing. I sometimes tell people, you can have all the computer geniuses in the world you want, but somebody's got to figure out how to flush the toilet when it won't. So,
yeah, we've also got to learn how to make the computer.
Right. Yeah. So that's also what the book is about, that there is dignity in what
definitely.
we choose to do. Yeah.
So that's good.
I'd like to read one of my poems, if I may.
Oh, feel free. I enjoy it when you do that.
Okay. Let's see. Well, you know what? When I was in college, I got very interested in folklore. In fact, one of my exams was a folklore exam. So I like to throw a little bit of, the mythology of human tradition once in a while. So when I was still working, one of the first jobs I did building houses out in the country where we didn't have power and things like that. Everything was temporary for a while. We dug wells, water wells, to get water in the houses and put pumps in. So this poem is called Witching for Water. The driller parked his rig along the roughed-out driveway, pulled a witching stick from behind his seat. A barkless Y stained the colors of hand sweat and tannin. It must be oak, and it must be native, he said. He held it waist-high and pointed the tip away from him toward the yellow grass of the back acres. He walked until the tip pulled toward the earth and into the dusty weeds. He drove a nail in the spot, and the rig hit the spot with the drill bit and brought in 21 gallons a minute at 148 feet. I thought the stick held the charm, or that the well man knew a chant. But Virgil had seen it all before, watched nature offer itself for use, known men who trusted tradition over technology. He never doubted we'd find water. Nature conjures its own magic. I think we've lost the planet. Everybody's involved in this. We've lost our care and our deep understanding of the nature of the planet. We're killing it. we're doing our darndest to destroy the water and the trees and the flowers and the critters. And I hope that there are a lot of people who are totally aware of that, of course, and doing great, exerting a great amount of energy to try to change it. And I hope we do. I hope we do. But this is sort of that. This poem reflects, going back to nature, and at the same time, it's got a well with power, pretty modern. So it kind of combines those two things. Yeah. I'd like to read another one, if I may.
Of course.
This is one of the lessons that I carry into almost everything I attempt. When I was an apprentice, it was as I mentioned, a long time ago, and we would take when we remodeled, like I said, Virgil, first big projects we did, he bought 14 houses, and we turned them into duplexes. So one of the things we did when we move a door or tear a wall down or something, he would have me, and he would also pull the nails out of the wood, and we'd reuse them. And one of my jobs, learning how to use a hammer, was to straighten those nails.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a poem called Bent Nails.
Mm.
Today we hardly use nails, we use screws, and we never use old nails. I've noticed that on jobs. If you pull a nail out and try to straighten it and use it again, people look at you funny. We've become a throwaway society.
Yeah.
The trick to pulling nails lies in the angle of the claw. Hook the claw onto the nail and bend it sideways. One way, then the other, and the nail comes out a little at a time without breaking the hammer handle. The bending and pulling crooks the nails into geometric shapes unsuitable for use. Virgil made me straighten them. Bent nails move with serpentine irregularity, and you cannot straighten a bent nail with one swing. You correct one flaw and move to the next, one swing of the hammer at a time. Early on, I hit my finger more than I hit the nail. I learned to look only at one kink at a time and hit it. I learned eventually to keep my fingers out of my own way, and I learned to strike the nail square on, like any other matter of concern.
That's good. You know, I can see my father doing the exact same thing, straightening out old nails.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. This I try to end these poems a little bit like a sonnet. They're not in sonnet form, but the ending couplets generally suggest an idea or an attitude, or some different take on the theme.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think, if you don't mind, I'd like to read one more.
Sure.
Let's see. I'm sorry for the no talk here. I'm looking for the poem. Hang on. Okay, this is one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. It's called The Mathematics of Enchantment. A 3-foot by 4-foot by 5-foot triangle makes a right angle. This knowledge allows the builder to carry a straight line along and away from an already existing point in space and time. The line, if extended, has two options. If the universe is flat, like the Earth, the line will extend to the end of eternity. If it is flexible and self-contained, like an Einsteinian glass ball, resting on the back of a turtle, the line will continue in an everlasting 180-degree angle and eventually return upon itself. The elegance of mathematics, its geometric subtlety of right angles and straight lines, can connect a room addition to a house and a straight line to the universe. The thunderous accuracy of mathematics suggests that a house is more than an angle and a line, more than mortar and brick, more than foundation and roof. If properly constructed, a house becomes its own universe, the beginning and end of memories scratched in the tabletop and growth charts on the wall, of holding fast to grandma's stew recipe and the crawling stage of granddaughter's daughter, of summers running out the back screen door, and of all things stored in three-dimensional boxes and stories and hearts.
Mm. Very nice.
Well, thank you.
So how long does it take you to work on a poem? I mean, I'm assuming it must take quite a while to come up with all of these different ideas.
I once heard an interview James Michener gave, and he said to the interview, "I'm not a very good writer, but I'm a really good rewriter."
Oh.
And so I write. I love the creative process. That surge of initial writing is passion for an artist, and but you know, Hemingway said that nobody sits down and writes a masterpiece. So we all have to revise.
Oh, sure.
And I think I mentioned I do more fictive writing than poetic, but I approach a poem the same way I do a story or a novel. I work on it and work on it and work on it. And, I can't remember what French poet said it, but he said, you put the comma in, you take the comma out, and you put the comma in, you take the comma out, and then one day you know you're done. So it's, you know, the right word and the right idea and that sort of thing. I very rarely am granted the gift of completeness on a first draft. So I put, like I just finished a new story about 10 days ago, the first draft of it. It took me maybe 2 weeks to write the story, and I'll wait 2 or 3 weeks before I go back and review it. You have to get away from it. You know, you gotta. Virgil used to tell me a good carpenter stands back and looks at his work, and I apply that to poetry. Poetry is, you know, these days we don't write. Most poets, I don't think, write epics. We live in a fast-paced society where I just read an article that the attention span of the younger generation is shrinking dramatically, and so people don't have time.
I don't know how much shorter it can get.
Yeah. So the poems got short, right? Probably with the modernists, but I think we still pretty much limit our understanding of a poem or our appreciation of a poem to about a page or page and a half. So it has to be concise. It has to be pertinent. And a poem actually takes me longer to finish than a story. Stories, one thing might be that I'm just a little more comfortable with fiction. But a poem takes a long time. Now, I might write a draft and have the idea, and sometimes I write a poem. My experience is that I'll write something 40 or 50 lines, and there's about 6 or 7 of them in there that trigger for me what I was trying to say, and I pull those out and I sit on them for a while. And some poems are a little more complete. I suppose that's true with any kind of writing. I don't know about journalists. That their discipline is substantially different, especially if they're writing for, you know, schedules. They got to come up with stuff in an hour. That's a little more difficult to do. So it takes a while. It took probably, I'm going to say 2 years from the time I decided I wanted to put this little book together to the time I was happy with enough poems to say, yeah, this says what I want it to.
Wow, that's impressive. You know, when you think of the amount of creativity in here, to be working on this, I assume off and on over the 2 years while you wrote.
Well, we have a pretty big family, and you know, I work even though I'm not a carpenter anymore. Teaching takes a little bit of time, so I don't get to write 6 or 7 or 8 hours a day.
Right.
Although I do in the summer, I tend to not teach in the summer, and that is a blessing, really. And I do a lot of composition during the summer. In other words, I write as much as I can during those days. And then I do a lot of revision. And the revision is what I do slowly and part-time. I can't always find or manage, an hour or 2 hours every day to work on the creative work. So it's a process, and everybody has their own, and that's mine. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So, was there any poem that you wanted to read before we end?
I was thinking, actually, I was thinking 3's probably enough, but
okay. Yeah.
Well, let's see. How about a confessional poem? So,
okay.
Confessional poems, were the vogue for a lot of times, and I've heard there's such a thing as confession in the Catholic Church, and so this is a confession, a craftsman's confession. I'll just read it.
Okay.
I confess that I have added to the burden of the earth, for I have plastered with smooth trowel and clever design concrete suffocation over much soil. No one made me. I did it for money. I accepted gratuity from those who drove prosperity in order to fatten my wallet. I did not think of polar bears or indigenous peoples. I thought about food and rent and steel-toed boots. For penance, I shall plant 1 more tree, 5 more flowers, 10 blades more of grass each spring before I die. I shall hold hope as a deterrent to commerce and nature as a measure for art.
Very nice. Very nice.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Yep. I enjoy your poetry. So.
Well, thank you. I like to write poetry. I just like to write. I like to tell stories, and so it's fun. Part of it's fun. Some of the revision's hard work, but mostly it's fun.
Yeah, that's the truth.
Well, I want to thank you again for interviewing me, for your kindnesses toward my work and my approach to the art and the craft of writing. And I hope we can do it some more. Do it again.
Yeah. If you do, just email me and we'll get together again. Yes, definitely.
That sounds great. Thank you for that.
Okay. Thank you again for letting me interview you. And,
you're welcome.
Would you like to close in a prayer?
I will. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, Lord, thanks for this time. We're glad for your gift of abundance and friendship and joy. And I ask you to continue to bless us and all those who are listening in the same way, to reveal yourself to us in a way that we may find comfort and joy. In the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Okay, Tom. Have a good day. And thanks again.
Thanks you too.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Hi there. This is Christine Mooney Flynn, host of the Catholic Mama podcast, and I'd like to invite you to join me over on the Catholic Mama. To develop a Christian family and raise children who are, and who, God willing, will continue to be confident Catholics, requires us as parents to be confident in our faith as well. So each week, I dive into topics that help to make sense of the Catholic faith and how to live out that faith in our vocation as husbands and wives, moms and dads. So whether you need help in explaining aspects of Catholic doctrine like the real presence in the Eucharist, or if you're looking for practical ideas on how to live a more Catholic life, my goal is that you'll find the answers and guidance you're looking for over on my show, The Catholic Mama. I hope to see you there.
To a production of WCAT Radio, please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up where knowledge takes flight.